ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. If you can please take your seats. So I'm going to attempt to say hello in Chinese. So, Niu Xi Men, Qian Qian Men, Zun Jing de Jia Bin Jia Bao. How? Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this Regional Flyway Initiative side event here at the World Coastal Forum. My name is Duncan Lang, and I work for the Asian Development Bank, and I'm your moderator for today. For those of you who don't know what the Regional Flyway Initiative is, it was set up by the Asian Development Bank, the East Asian Australasian Flyway Partnership, and BirdLife International, and was launched in 2021 with the aim of mobilizing $3 billion in financing for sustainable management and protection of a network of the highest priority sites for migratory waterbirds along the Flyway. Today, we will be discussing the innovative financing approaches with a focus on the People's Republic of China. I'm very pleased to see all of you today, and we have some great keynote speakers lined up, and I'm looking forward to our panel discussion as well. Before we begin, let me share with you the session's format. We will first start with opening remarks from three of our speakers. We will then move to a scene-setting presentation on the RFI, and this will then be followed by two keynote presentations on innovative financing. We will then move to our panel discussion and finally closing remarks. Hopefully, we'll get this all in 90 minutes. I'm not sure, but I'll have to be quick. Okay. So to kick things off, we're lucky enough to have three speakers for the opening remarks, and I will introduce them all together and then invite each of them afterwards to come up and give their opening remarks. So first off, we have Mr. Rui Zhao, Deputy Division Director for the Department of Wetland Management in the National Forestry and Grassland Administration. Mr. Zhao is the Deputy Division Director of the Department of Wetland Management within NFGA. He works in the division in charge of implementation for the Convention on Wetlands. Over the last 2 years, his department has overseen important work on Ramsar site designation and management, international wetland city accreditation, and international cooperation, amongst other things. We will then have Ms. Jennifer George, who is the Chief Executive for the East Asian Australasian Flyway Partnership Secretariat. You will have seen her in all the high-level super-duper things earlier on. Jennifer George has a distinguished career in various fields, including legal practice, education, and business development. She recently contributed to the Flyway Partnership MOP 11 decision papers, including the guidelines for EAAFP national site partnerships and guidelines for the sister site program. She is an active member of the EAAFP partner Pukaroko Miranda Nationalist Trust, so I've probably got that wrong, where her interest and passion for conservation of migratory birds was built. She has meaningful stints with government organizations such as the Secretariat of Climate Change, Chief Executive's Board of the Ministry of Environment within New Zealand, the Ministry of Justice, New Zealand Qualifications Authority, and the Wellington City Council. And then last of our opening speakers, we will have Alex Zhang, Mr. Alex Zhang, Secretary General of the Eco Global Foundation and Executive Director of the Yellow Sea Wetland Institute. Alex Zhang is the Secretary General, as I said, of Eco Foundation Global and the Executive Director of the Yellow Sea Wetland Institute. He is the Global Executive Committee member of ICLEI, Vice Governor of the IUCN China member network, and he focuses on eco-civilization development and sustainable development, protected areas management and capacity building, international cooperation and local implementation of biodiversity conservation and climate change mitigation, and he's been doing that for more than 10 years. He received a BA in economics from Columbia and impressively an MBA from Harvard Business School. Right, so if we can now move on to our speakers. Mr. Zhao, please, would you come forward and give your opening remarks? The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. 尊敬的各位来宾、各位朋友，大家下午好。在中秋佳节来临之际，非常高兴相聚在美丽的国际湿地城市盐城，参加由亚洲开发银行举办的千飞倡议创新投融资方式研讨会。受国家林草局湿地司领导委托，向参加此次研讨会的嘉宾表示热烈欢迎。对举办此次研讨会的亚行和给予大力支持的盐城表示衷心的感谢。中国有4条候鸟迁飞通道，生态价值高，受威胁程度高，具有迫切的保护需求。为此，中国政府持续发力，主要开展以下方面工作：第一，强化法治保障，加大监管力度。中华人民共和国湿地保护法就滨海湿地保护专门设置条款，明确要求各地要加强对滨海湿地的保护和管理，加大监管力度，压实工作责任。第二，坚持系统治理，提升保护成效，坚持山水林田湖草沙一体化保护和系统治理，综合运用自然恢复和人工修复2种手段，加大河口、三角洲、滩涂、红树林、珊瑚礁、海草床等滨海生态系统的保护力度，保护好全球候鸟迁飞的滨海通道。第三，科学谋划布局，强化美好蓝图。我局联合自然资源部印发的《全国湿地保护规划（2022到2030年）》，将滨海湿地分布的海岸带进行优先分布，在国际重要湿地、国家重要湿地实施一批滨海湿地保护修复重大工程。第四，加强国际合作，提升治理能力。前不久，湿地公约常委会第62次会议批准在我国设立国际红树林中心，今后将通过国际红树林中心交流平台，积极参与和推动全球滨海生态治理与保护合作。湿地保护高质量发展体系框架已搭建，但保护体系需进一步完善，资金投入需进一步加大，需要与社会各界共同努力，提升科技支撑水平，填补政府资金投入结构性缺口，提升公众保护意识，保护好候鸟及其栖息地。最后，预祝本次研讨会圆满成功，谢谢大家。
Thank you very much for those fantastic remarks, Mr. Zhao. They've kicked us off nicely. I think it's very good just to say that, NFGA is doing a wonderful job and there's, so much to build off in our work with NFGA, so thank you very much for that. Ms. Jennifer, over to you. The floor is yours for your opening remarks. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd really like to reiterate Duncan's remarks about the NFGA. And I'm new to the role in 3 months, and in this time I visited Beijing and the NFGA, Beijing Forestry University. And always the warmth of the welcome and the extent of the interest in migratory birds is exemplary. And now added to that is the warmth and the direction that the Jiangsu Province is taking. Now I'd like to acknowledge those today. Also I'd like to acknowledge our distinguished guests here as well. So the East Asian Australasian Partnership, we've partnered with the Asian Development Bank and BirdLife International. Why? Because we share a passion, And that passion is for habitats that nurture our migratory birds, and they take care not only of the birds, but of the men, women, families, Indigenous and traditional communities that share those habitats. And in the wider context, the East Asian Australasian Flyway is a partnership of 18 governments and international organisations and even a corporate that work together for that conservation. In sharing knowledge across the whole Flyway from New Zealand, Russia, Alaska. Now within our Flyway, there are more than 1,000 sites of importance. Now, at the moment, we only have 15% of those that are designated as our Flyway network site. So what does that tell us? There is so much work to do. And so the World Coastal Forum and our partnership with ADB and BirdLife, I think has the potential to create a lot of difference to that. I'm personally passionate about how we build partnerships. Duncan mentioned that I had done some work for the Secretariat before I had this job, and that is about partnerships, how we create partnerships at a national level for our habitats and our birds, how we then create partnerships at the local community, and then once we've done that, how we build relationships between sites across borders or within our borders. And I think that the RFI, Regional Flyway Initiative, really assists with that. And it is a structure, and it's a structure that engages national governments right through to local governments, to sites and the communities. And it's got a wonderful goal of reaching up to 50 of those important sites, building capacity. So there are three parts to it. There are the site selection, working with the national governments. The second, it's engagement with important stakeholders, so local government, NGOs, communities. And then the third one is financing, and that's what brings us to our plenary today. It all comes down to money. So financing the establishment to this date has occurred through both direct and in-kind contributions from both government, academia, and other generous entities. So we have a structure, and it is beginning to work. The challenge is now is sustainable financing going forward. And this challenge, we know that this challenge exists across conservation, biodiversity, it exists across climate change. So there is a call for financing in all those sectors. And the resources of the philanthropic sector in our national governments and many of our countries is limited. So how do we define sustainable financing when those usual ways of grants, loans, donations, in-kind contributions are no longer sufficient? That's the purpose, my understanding of our plenary today, to investigate, explore innovative ways of securing those funding for habitat preservation and restoration across our sites. So I trust today that in this plenary we start a conversation about innovation for financing with a focus on those sites for the RFI. And I hope today that today inspires questions and that it inspires ideas and that we can have those conversations going forward today in the panel discussions and going forward. Cheers here.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. That was fantastic. So I think it was really good scene setting, and I think you've G'd us up to now be even more wondering what they're going to say in the keynote presentations. So now, Mr. Alex Zhang, my friend, who was here at the very beginning. He was part of our launch back in 2021. So it's nice that we've come to Alex's event to be here as well. So thank you, Alex, for agreeing, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Duncan Lang, head of the ADB RFI project. And thank you for the extensive introduction of all the speakers. I wish I have 2 pages of your CV to give introduction of you in an English way. 尊敬的林处长、周处长、 Jennifer George, CEO of the East Asia Australian Flyway Partnership, 盐城市人民银行的张伟副行长，各位来宾，大家下午好。我是全球滨海论坛国际协调委员会的协调员张海，我谨代表全球滨海论坛国际协调委员会，向参会的各位嘉宾表示感谢，也预祝亚洲开发银行本次专题研讨会取得圆满成功，能为湿地保护提供更多的创新融资方式。提到湿地保护融资，早在2011年，据我所知 ，ADB 就为本次论坛的承办地盐城的湿地保护项目发放了低息贷款，在江苏省政府、盐城市委市政府的支持下，专门用于盐城湿地的保护与修复，对解决湿地和自然保护区生态破坏问题，改善盐城多个湿地和自然保护区的生态健康和服务起到了重要作用。随着滨海湿地环境大幅改善，湿地生物多样性持续增加，生态效应不断放大。在2019年黄渤海国际湿地研讨会上 ，ADB 和 BirdLife International 以及EAFP 就迁飞区候鸟的保护工作进行了探讨。此后，大家不断地进行深入的方案设计，并最终在2021年于昆明举办的 CBD COP15 第一阶段会议上签署了合作协议。就像刚才 Duncan 先生介绍的，我也很有幸参加了这个 RFI 项目的启动仪式。回到本次研讨会的主题，全球滨海保护领域面临着巨大的资金缺口，迁飞区域倡议的提出是非常具有雄心的目标，20年30亿美金的专项贷款，促进在未来20年迁飞区重要湿地的保护和可持续管理，可获得融资，并建立一个连贯的栖息地网络。各位来宾在昨天的全球滨海论坛开幕式上，应该已经听到了全球滨海论坛伙伴关系倡议的发布。那全球滨海论坛伙伴关系的使命是调动、促进和推动地方、国家和国际层面的力量，以科学和实证为基础，保护、养护、可持续管理和恢复海岸带的生态系统，协同履行国际承诺。其核心理念与区域迁飞区倡议提出的建立一个连贯的栖息地网络不谋而合。同时，论坛也在此次会议上发布了全球滨海生态系统保护工具包里面的护花迷草防治和盐沼湿地修复工具包，这些都可以与亚开行多年来探索的湿地创新融资方式项目相结合，从金融与技术两个不同的层面探索滨海湿地保护的科学模式。女士们、先生们，海洋是相连的，海岸线也是相连的。区域迁飞区倡议也将东亚大利西亚迁飞区，据我所知，目前有50多个重点区域的湿地的保护工作紧紧联系在了一起。我相信 RFI 项目将为保护迁飞区湿地的生态系统服务，守护人类福祉上迈出重大的一步。最后，全球滨海论坛国际协调委员会愿意加强与 ADB、RFI 及在座各位所代表的机构和嘉宾加强务实合作，愿意欢迎大家加入全球滨海论坛伙伴关系，也欢迎大家参加今天晚上7点到9点将举办的论坛国际咨询会。再次感谢各位的到来，谢谢。
Okay, thank you very much for those warm remarks. Alex and I will be there later today. So let me now turn to my good friend, Mr. Dingley Yong, who is going to give you a brief presentation. I think it will have to be pretty brief, on what we're doing with the Regional Flyway Initiative. And he's going to give you a flavour of some of the work we've done on ecosystem services. I think that's really important because when we start to value nature, then we can kind of build that business case for investing in it. So very quickly, Ding Li, many of you know him. He's a bit of a superstar in these circles, but he's worked in the diverse teams across Asia to scale up projects that protect ecosystems and species, including some of the world's most threatened wildlife. He has 15 years of experience in biodiversity, science and environmental policy, and has worked many conventions. He's also been worked for the Arctic Council, Bonn Convention, CBD, and he's done a bunch of papers and written a few books. So he's a great guy to have on our team. And now, Ding Li, can I turn the floor to you for your presentation? Thank you.
Very good afternoon to distinguished guests and colleagues. My name is Yancheng City. I'm the Regional Migratory Bird Conservation Coordinator for BirdLife International here in Asia. And I'm really pleased to see all of you here today. Thank you very much for making time to join us in this session. In the next hour, we will share with you a little bit more about the Regional Flyway initiative. Some of you perhaps may have learned about it in the last few events. We'll hopefully through this session learn about how RFI can help you and I with the conservation of wetlands here in Asia, and also hopefully an opportunity for us to provide important updates on the project we have up to this stage. First of all, let me give you a quick bit of background on the Regional Flyway Initiative, or the RFI as we call it, if you are hearing it here for the first time. The RFI is an exciting initiative jointly developed by BirdLife, EAFP, and the Asian Development Bank to contribute to the long-term and sustainable management of important wetlands in Asia to protect migratory species as well as the ecosystem services and livelihoods that they can offer for people. Over time, and as Duncan has mentioned earlier, the RFI aims to mobilize more than $3 billion in grant and loan financing to a connected network of about 50 of the most important wetland sites here in Asia, if not more. That means this will translate to about $10 to $15 million per site invested on average over a period of about 10 years. And of course, there's also considerable scope for co-financing from other development banks and the private sector. So over the past 2 years, we at BirdLife, we have been working very closely with our colleagues at the ADB and the EAFP, as well as the wider RFI team, including our colleagues at Wetlands International and the Paulson Institute, to collate data on wetlands and migratory birds to figure out where these most important priority sites are distributed across the 10 countries of the RFI. And portfolios of prioritized sites have been developed and identified for each country and are in the process of being consulted with national governments. Going forward, we have also commenced work to determine the ecosystem services at each of the RFI sites using a combination of model-based and field-based data collection. Towards the end of the development phase of the RFI, we are aiming to develop project concepts that can provide a framework and a guidance of what needs to be done at each site to protect ecosystems while ensuring that local people and the local economy also benefits. So just to give you a rough idea of where we are, some of these points I've covered before. To show us where we are at this stage of the RFI, we have already completed the data-driven prioritization of sites. So we are ongoing consultation with governments of the 10 countries to understand their priorities, their context, and embarking on work to assess the ecosystem services at each site. So just to give you a really quick timeline of where we are in the development phase of the RFI, we are here in 2023, and you can see that we're now working to collect as much feedback as we can from governments that we are consulting with, while enabling work on ecosystem services to be also undertaken. In the next few slides, I will talk you through the process and the criteria that we have adopted in the selection and prioritization of sites, as well as the outcome of our site selection work across the 10 countries of the Flyway, and especially here in the People's Republic of China. First of all, to ensure that we have a robust framework for us to identify sites, we have been looking very carefully at a few prioritization approaches. And our team have agreed to adopt a selection framework that is well aligned with the criteria of the East Asian Australasian Flyway Partnership, the Wetlands Convention, and the Important Bird and Biodiversity Area, or what we call the IBA framework. This framework is then applied on the most recently available data for each site, of which we are able to compile from published papers, reports, and compare against the most recently launched 1% estimates for EAF species, which was released by the EAFP and Wetlands International just about a year ago. And of course, in our site selection, besides looking at coastal wetlands, as we can see, are very important for migratory waterbirds, we have also looked very, very carefully at freshwater wetlands across the major river basins of the region, especially here in China, in the Yellow River, the Changjiang, and the Heilongjiang, as well as the associated plains. My next few slides will give you an overview of the sites we have identified across the 10 countries of the EAF. And as you can see in this slide, this gives you a flavor and a sense of how these sites are distributed across all 10 countries of the Flyway. China, by virtue of its location in the Flyway and its geography, has a total of 60 RFI sites identified in total, of which 37 are on the coast, and about 23 of these are on the major river plains. I think the next few slides will give you a bit of an overview of where these sites are in China. I think these are some of these slides that you may have seen before in other presentations of mine. As you can see here in China, there's of course a very large number of coastal sites. This slide also gives you a sense of some of these important migratory species that are found here in China that we have are obviously triggering the criteria for some of these wetland sites in the country. So I will run through this very quickly, but I would like to focus a little bit more on the Yellow Sea Bohai region, as we can see right here at the heart of the East Asian Australasian Flyway. Just looking at the provinces that's spread across the Yellow Sea and Bohai, we can see that some of the most important sites for migratory species in this flyway is clustered around the several provinces around the Yellow Sea and Bohai. So for example, you have sites that are all very well known to us, like Yalujiang, Liaohe, Zhuanghe, and a few of these other sites in Liaoning Province, in Hebei Province, in Tianjin, in Shandong, and of course here in Jiangsu Province, of which some of the most important sites are found, for example, in Yancheng and in Jiaozhini. As we look further at the sites that we have selected for China, we have also tried to ensure that there's alignment with other priorities for conservation in the country. So we looked very carefully at the other conservation gaps in actions where investments are needed. We also look very closely at synergies with the UNESCO Phase 2 process, as well as sites that are already nationally protected or are Ramsar sites. And from this process of looking carefully at the first list of sites for China, we are able to narrow this list down to about a list of about 23 priority sites for the whole country. So again, you can see here a shorter list of some of the most important wetland sites in the country, distributed across the provinces, both coastal and inland. Again, just to give you a rough sense of the distribution of sites, as you can see, many of these sites are clustered around the Yellow Sea and Bohai area. And of course, quite a number here in Jiangsu Province. As we proceeded with the development of the RFI, we also looked carefully at all these key initiatives in China, which we see there to be very many important opportunities for us to achieve synergies with. Alongside this, we are working to ensure that RFI's contribution to wetland sites in China can synergize and contribute to many of these key national initiatives to provide, to protect the environment. As a global leader in wetland conservation and management, we see that there are many opportunities for the RFI to contribute to and to synergize with initiatives for wetlands and migratory birds here in China. And of course, going forward, we will continue to engage with government stakeholders to get the best possible feedback for the set of sites that have been identified across coastal and inland provinces. Once we have collected this feedback, we can then proceed to determine the activities to best identify ecosystem services and understand how the RFI can contribute to each of these sites in consultation with key stakeholders. Through these engagements, we also aim to identify areas for us to build capacity for in wetland conservation. And in China, there has been really good progress for the RFI, as I understand. Dongtinghu in Hunan is obviously where work is ongoing to develop a large-scale project for wetlands. You will learn more about this in the next presentation by my colleague, Alex. So some of you may ask, what are the next steps? What are the next steps for us in developing these project site concepts now that we have prioritized key wetland sites across the Flyway and here in China? The way we see the key next step for us, on top of prioritizing sites for biodiversity, is to also look closely at the ecosystem services these RFI sites can offer. This is very important for us to consider because many of these important wetland sites are where large human communities, towns and cities are located very near to them. And so it is very important for us to consider how people and how local economies can benefit from these wetland sites. To this end, our ecosystem services team, led by my colleagues at the University of Southampton, BirdLife and the National University of Singapore, have worked hard to develop a broad framework to assess provisioning and regulatory services offered for each of these RFI sites. And this will be done through a combination of high-level, modeling-based assessments and site-level-based participatory assessments. So basically, we are adopting a two-pronged approach to figure out what are the ecosystem services at each of these RFI sites. We are looking at the regulating services through high-level modeling, and we are also looking at these provisioning services through on-ground consultation with local stakeholders at each of these RFI sites. Some of the modeling approaches that we will be looking at as we look at these ecosystem services include work to look at coastal protection and flood mitigation across major riverine floodplains in different parts of Asia. In the last couple of months, we have made good progress in work to understand, for example, the flood benefits and the coastal protection benefit of mangrove and other sorts of coastal wetlands in different countries of Southeast Asia. For instance, we have just recently completed an assessment using a modeling-based approach for wetlands in Thailand. And this map here shows you one of these very important sites in Thailand where we have looked very carefully at with regards to the annual benefits from the site from mangroves towards protection from storms. Going forward, we are also looking at the stakeholder-based consultation on the ground. Some of you who have been following our RFI progress are aware that we have recently completed a couple of stakeholder consultation workshops in the Philippines, in Cambodia, and moving on towards Thailand. We have adopted a framework based on documents that many of us are very familiar with already. Many of you here are very familiar with, for example, the RMET framework, the RAWIS framework, and of course, documentation of ecosystems using the key biodiversity area framework. And using this combination of frameworks, we will be proceeding into a more consultative approach with stakeholders on the ground through workshops to understand the ecosystem services at sites in the different countries of the Flyway. Very recently, we have completed a workshop to consult with our site managers and other stakeholders in Cambodia. And I hope that in a couple of months, we will be able to have a good understanding of the ecosystem services provided by key wetlands across the RFI sites of Cambodia and other countries going forward. I think that brings me to the end of my very short background presentation. As Duncan has mentioned, my presentation is intended to give you a flavor, not a very comprehensive look, but just a flavor of what RFI has achieved so far. And very much we are looking forward to working with you to help to document other RFI sites in this Flyway so that we can work closely together better to protect some of these most important migratory bird sites in our continent. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that, Ding Li. That was very comprehensive. I think we all got very good view of the RFI. And actually, I think it's useful for our audience here today to kind of give the flavor for what's happening here in the People's Republic of China. And we're lucky to have some representatives here of some of the sites that are listed on our priority list, which is fantastic. So now we'll turn to our first keynote speaker, which is Mr. Alex Cassini. He is the Director of Conservation Capital Exchanges, within Conservation Capital. Alex is doing a whole bunch of stuff, venture studio, knowledge capture management, and analytical platform management. Alex has also recently been working closely with the Conservation Finance Alliance on developing new nature stewardship bonds, bond offering. He has been part of the Okavango Capital Partners Fund 1 launch team and has been leading Conservation Capital's work with the Eden Project in the UK on developing a national wildflower company, a nature credit-driven business being developed in response to the UK government's biodiversity net gain legislation. So Alex, please, the floor is yours. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Duncan, for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure and honor to be here today. My name is Alex Cassini, and I work for Conservation Capital. Today, I want to talk about progressive financing mechanism for the conservation and restoration of natural capital, and in particular, the issue of bankability and increasing the engagement of the private sector. So first, to clarify, when I speak of bankability, I mean the creation of financing mechanisms that drive meaningful conservation outcomes, but can also A, service the repayment of the underlying principal, and B, generate an acceptable level of risk-adjusted return. We're basically trying to shift conservation financing from the historical reliance on the public sector and philanthropic money to attract more progressive private and capital market investments. Let's see. Good. Our company, Conservation Capital, was founded 20 years ago when we decided to focus on a specific dynamic, interfacing commercial finance, commercial business, and the conservation and restoration of natural capital. While it was a niche topic years ago, today has become a mainstream concern. And the transition to mainstream has been unfortunately prompted by a very concerning and urgent context, the widening gap for nature conservation. This gap between the demand and supply is currently estimated at around $700 billion per year and seems to be on the rise. Now, while we remain a small and focused shop company, Conservation Capital has had a relatively important footprint. Over the years, we worked in 4 continents, nearly 50 countries, and successfully raised and structured hundreds of millions of dollars through more than 250 projects and transactions. And I'm also thrilled to mention our growing intervention in Asia Pacific, our work with ADB and the Flyway in particular, marking an increasing focus of our operations in the region. So what has been our approach to achieve our impact? At Conservation Capital, we channel our efforts through 3 interconnected disciplines, which we call innovative nature finance, engaging mainstream corporations, and conservation area business planning. So first, let's talk about innovative conservation finance, or ICF for short. ICF aims to establish new financing mechanisms which attract a wider and more diverse range of investment to the natural capital sector. with a particular focus, as I said, on the private sector and the capital markets that support them. A good example of this, which many of you will know, is the wildlife conservation bond that some call the Rhino bond, which was introduced on the Luxembourg Stock Exchange a couple of years ago. The Rhino bond is emblematic of a profound change in conservation funding. The African black rhino is a species on the brink of extinction and stood at the core of this bond. The capitalization of that bond was $150 million, and the bond got a lot of attention and was fully subscribed in a very few hours. This quick and strong interest, in our view, shows that the main financial sectors have a growing interest for nature-focused investments, especially if these are structured to address the associated risk perceptions from the markets. The success of this bond was obviously anchored on the emblematic black rhino, but I think there's nothing holding us back from thinking about the potential around the insurance in the near future, for instance, of a Flyway bond. Why not? Oh, sorry, getting there. Now, after ICF, our second major focus at CC is on engaging mainstream corporation, or EMC in short. So from our interactions, there is a prevailing sentiment surfacing, which is that by 2030, we expect mainstream commercial corporations to hopefully take the lead in nature financing. And this forecast forms the foundation of our EMC approach. I guess our approach is a bit different from most others, consultants in the sector. Our attention focuses on what we've called the right side of zero. So rather than try just and mitigate the negative impacts on nature, we aim to restore, enrich, and add back to nature. And as we do that, we try that these efforts go hand in hand with improved financial performance for businesses that invest in nature. So a good example of this approach is our current work with a major infrastructure financing institution based in London, with whom we're designing a financing mechanism to support a SPV, a special purpose vehicle, in relation to a $650 million infrastructure project, a run-of-the-river hydropower project in southwestern Zambia. Our aim there is to secure for conservation an equity stake of about $30 million within the total equity pool of $150 million in that project. If our efforts in Zambia succeed, we are quite excited because we'll be transforming what is typically linked with a profound negative to conservation and infrastructure development into something capable of mobilizing in the range of $200 to $300 million for community-led conservation in the Zambezi Basin over the next 25 years. It's obviously work in progress, but if successful, I think it would show how mainstream markets are finally recognizing the role of local communities in preserving these critical ecosystems, but it could also pave the way for other infrastructure projects around the world to do the same. And obviously, within the Flyway area, why not? Having discussed our ICF and EMC disciplines, our third pillar is conservation area business planning. So for CABP, as we call it, when we deal with significant terrestrial or marine conservation areas, we like to blend traditional operational planning with innovative financing tools. This means creating non-correlated revenue streams and establishing a a strong framework of legal, corporate, governance, and partnership systems. We work across various scales, from a small location to much larger conservation area and landscapes, which can include often PPPs, public-private partnerships. So standout example of our CABP work is Old Pejeta Conservancy in Kenya that some of you might know. We led the transformation of this 100,000-acre commercial livestock ranch into a model for wildlife conservation. Our strategy there was to introduce diversified revenue sources and ensure the harmonious coexistence between wildlife, livestock management, agriculture, and residential projects on the property. Each of these revenue strategies was carefully crafted to access different market channels while ensuring that their cycles, both highs and low, did not colorate, which turned the operation not only profitable, but also highly resilient. Today, Old Pejeta is a very diverse biodiversity hub, provides invaluable ecosystem services to the communities, boasts the largest black rhino population in East Africa, and attracts over 100,000 visitors per year, mostly domestic tourists. So Old Pejeta is a testament to our CABP approach, and we'll definitely be looking into the possible application of such a model for some sites along the Flyway. Now, given today's topic on engaging the private sector and driving bankability to finance nature, I'd like to focus a bit more on our innovative conservation finance discipline. When you break it down, finance comes usually in three forms: grants, debt, or equity. And then there's a mix of these, otherwise known as blended finance, which many recognize is an increasingly important technique for the conservation sector. So with ICF, our primary goal is to shift from the prevalent grant-centric approach towards the later two, debt and equity, with a strong focus on bankability. I think it's important to reiterate that there's a huge gap of $700 million that we need to fill, and it's clear that traditional sources of public and philanthropic funding will not be sufficient to bridge this growing gap. So given the urgency of this shortfall and the existential risk posed by biodiversity loss, climate change, innovative and bankable financing solutions are imperative and needed quickly to attract more capital. Before we explore in more depth our process for unlocking more bankable nature financing mechanisms, or so-called NFA, I'd like to share a bit more about our ongoing work with the East Asian Australasian Flyway Initiative, a project in collaboration with ADB, BirdLife International, and the EAFP. We're deeply honored to contribute to this initiative, where our primarily efforts are concentrated on crafting the project financing structures for the East Asia and Australasia regions. As part of the RFI, we are in the process of applying our nature financing assessment process, which I'll be talking about later, to a specific site in China, the South Dongting Lake. For the 23 priority sites identified by ADB, the estimated investment needed spans between $10 to $60 million from 2023 to 2035. And while grants are anticipated to cover a segment of this, I think the real challenge is filling the remaining financial void with more bankable nature financing mechanisms. These mechanisms are designed to engage both the private and the public sectors, reinforcing the current conservation and community-focused initiatives led by the government and other RFI stakeholders. As such, implementing the NFA at Dongting Lake is a step we're eagerly gearing up for in the next few months. In fact, this process has already been applied in its very early stages, and we've started with initial desktop analysis of the South Dongting Lake area. This site supports nearly 16 million people and primarily revolves around agriculture and fisheries. We've begun to examine its ecological context, including current ecosystem services, threats, local governments, stakeholder landscape, land tenure, and local economic operations. Its early applications provide reason to be very optimistic about the potential for nature-based solutions there, and we've already explored the possibility of nature stewardship bonds for the site. In the next 6 months or so, we'll be multiplying our assessments with other financing mechanisms, and our findings will be integrated into the Dongting Lake project design and presented to the ADB's board in the first half of 2024 for wider application along the Flyway. So now let's take a deep dive in our NFA methodology. First, who is the NFA designed for? Well, its target audience ranges from a protected area management agency to nature-based businesses and conservation NGOs on the demand side to conservation financiers and investors on the supply side. When we break down the objectives of our process, there are 3 main goals. One is empowering the practitioners. The NFA assists them in answering crucial questions. What are the most efficient and sustainable ways to finance my conservation or restoration objectives? Number 2 is enhancing the financial flows. The NFA aims to increase the overall volume, diversity, and sustainability of financing for natural capital. And 3, the goal is promoting nature as an asset class. Ultimately, the NFA advances an urgent and essential transformation, which is positioning nature as a widely recognized, viable, and investable asset class. Our NFA methodology offers a structured and comprehensive process for exploring the potential of progressive nature financing mechanisms, we call NFMs, across a wide range of natural capital contexts. And we apply this NFA process through a 3-phase stage. Phase 1 is framing, phase 2 is analysis, and phase 3 is execution. So the first component of the NFA we refer to as the framing phase. This is crucial to ensure that our process is demand-led and tailored to the specific context. Starting point, step 1, is a needs assessment. We begin by gaining a clear understanding of the potential partners' organizational structure, how they operate, and their financial needs. As mentioned, this could be a public or private protected area management agency, a nature-based business, or potential investor strategizing on how to best allocate and structure their support for a particular project or site. Then we transition to step 2 and examine the macro level optimizers. These are country-level dynamics that can affect how appealing a project is to investors. We evaluate these dynamics based on 5 categories: political stability, economic stability, business ease, biodiversity importance, and environmental performance. These categories help us to gauge the potential success and impact of a project within a country's context. Next is step 3, and the end of the framing process, where we focus on what we call the project or site level optimizers. So these optimizers are unique to a project or a site, and again influence its financial appeal to investors. At this stage, we assess institutional considerations, such as the existence of well-defined property rights, the entity's legal framework, or its commitment to a clear conservation vision. We also review management considerations like governance, sensitivity to stakeholders, risk management culture, track record, and so on. Other elements of the optimizers relate to performance consideration, which include, for example, current revenue patterns or cost efficiency metrics. And finally, there's some specific consideration like the need, for example, to comply in a certain place with Islamic financing standards, one example. Am I here? Yeah. So here. After the framing phase, we move to phase 2, the analysis, which is the heart of the process. In the second phase, we analyze which classes of natural financing mechanisms or their combination are more feasible to the given context and more likely to be both suitable and viable. In phase 2, we evaluate an evolving range of what are currently 20 nature financing mechanisms. Each of these mechanisms, or NFM, has a unique way of integrating into the ecosystem, as you can see on the graphic. They range from the more traditional to progressive and are often combined to form blended instruments. They can be balance sheet driven, focus on capital rising, or profit and loss account driven, focusing on recurring revenue generation. Or an NFM can combine both of these dynamics. So generally speaking, on the right-hand side of that graphic, you'll find the more bankable NFMs, but usually to unlock their full potential, it often requires to blend them with the mechanisms on the left of the graphic. In every context, our mission is to find the right balance by blending traditional NFMs with more niche ones in the momentum and progressive quarters over there. Just to give you an example, if you take grants, historically, conservation has heavily relied, as I said, on grants, and they're definitely not bankable. But they still hold a crucial role, especially with blended structures. Effectively using grants can unlock the potential of emerging other mechanisms, such as nature-assured bonds or impact bonds, with enhanced risk-return profiles. So mixing grants with another NFM is a very simple illustration on how a diverse approach to financing mechanism can effectively channel more funds towards nature. So phase 2 starts with the actual evaluation of these NFMs. In the initial step 4, we turn our attention to what we call the investability traits of these mechanisms. We also call these the market makers, as they are critical in gauging the appeal of an NFM to a diverse group of investors. There are 6 investability traits, and one is precedence. Obviously, if you have a strong track record, this is key. An NFM that has been used successfully in the past can show to be effective, and we can apply the best practices learned from past implementations. Number 2 is bankability. Can the NFM deliver investment risk-return profiles that can go toe-to-toe with mainstream capital market offerings? 3, sustainability. Is the NFM designed to yield long-term conservation outcomes without the need for constant refinancing? Number 4, outcome-driven. Does the NFM prioritize tangible and impactful conservation results? We try again to move away from the old finance models that mainly look at what money is spent on the outputs and focus more on the actual impact on natural capital, the outcomes. Next trait is directness. How much of the funding actually goes directly to the conservation initiatives? The more that drops directly to finance, to conservation, the better, obviously. And 6th trait is replicability. Can this NFM be easily replicated and scaled? So to sum up, the product of all these traits constitute the appeal of each NFM to the investors. Obviously, the wider the appeal, the larger the net we can cast in the financial world to raise some funds. And the more an NFM resonates with both traditional investment institutions and modern impact investors, the more powerful tool it is to deploy. Now, alongside the investability traits in step 4, we also assess what we call the imperatives and specific optimizers for each NFM. Let's go to this. Let's start with the imperatives. What are imperatives? They're specific dynamics that, in our view, must be present for NFM to be fundamentally feasible. If the imperatives are not present, the NFM will not progress to phase 3 of our assessment. If I take an example for impact bonds, the imperatives would include first, a defined and measurable conservation indicator. There must be a distinct conservation objective set within a specific area or a certain aim which can be reliably assessed. Second, you need a specific conservation growth target. There should be a precise conservation growth goal, one that can be measurable and typically achievable within a short span, often under 5 years, to match the maturity of the bond. Third, you need an outcome payer, an entity that is willing to shoulder a contingent long-term liability, committing to pay at bond maturity if the project succeeds. And lastly, you need a transaction management capacity. It's essential to have an organization equipped with the right expertise and resources to oversee the entire financing mechanism from design to rolling it out. Having discussed the non-negotiable, the imperatives, we turn our attention now to specific optimizers. So unlike imperatives, these optimizers are not deal breakers. We like to call them the nice-to-haves. Nonetheless, they hold significant value with the potential of enhancing the feasibility of a specific NFM. Again, if I take an example, let's take biodiversity credit. The optimizers for them would be proximity, as there is a preference for projects that are located near a company's operational base or located near the site where the biodiversity loss has occurred, making proximity a notable factor. Regulation, moving beyond the voluntary market can significantly boost a project's viability. If you have a robust and well-structured regulatory framework, it enhances the market credibility, like, for instance, the upcoming BNG regulation that Duncan mentioned and will come in force in November in England. And then there are a few more, like rating, trading marketplace, and so on. After we explore the imperatives and specific optimizers, the next key component of phase 2 is step 5, we call the limiter management stage. Here, we assess and strategize. We assess. Sorry, let me come back. At this stage, our focus shifts. We're now looking at the challenges or limiters that NFMs might face. While many NFMs have promising potential, they also bring their unique sets of challenges. So what are these limiters? They are usually inherent obstacles that could impact the success of NFMs. And through our experience and research, we've identified 7 limiters that are common roadblocks in nature financing. Our task here is to determine if and how we can address these challenges within the specific context of a project. I guess I don't have time to detail every limiters, but I'll let you read. These are the 7 there. Trying to keep on track with time, sorry. Up. So as we, so just last word on limiters, I'll say understanding and addressing limiters is still a very crucial step towards securing increasing financing nature. It's really key. As we wrap up phase 2 and move on to phase 3, we assemble a detailed feasibility assessment of the selected NFMs that have gone through the process of phase 1 and 2. And this build on the analysis of the previous phases and enriched by our experience in the field over the years. The process aims to pinpoint the NFMs that align best with the conservation goals and context of the entity that we're working with. And then transitioning to step 6 and the selection of NFMs, we put together a list of the top priority mechanisms, integrating various options and possibly different management structures such as CTFs, PFPs, or PPPs. And then we refine and finalize this in collaboration with the relevant partners. Proceeding to the final step 7, and concluding phase 3, we work with our partners to build a go-to-market plan. This is all about funding the selected NFMs and determining the best structure for them. For this, we will build a specific strategy for assessing and approaching potential investors. So overall, and finally to sum up, thank you for your patience, the NFM process goes beyond a comprehensive analysis. It's a journey from identifying the opportunities to realizing tangible and positive outcomes. So as we conclude our assessment with the NFA, we're ready to translate the selected mechanisms to real-world application, which serves our ultimate goal to reach a more sustainable and balanced relationship with nature. To conclude, I'd like to say that myself and all my colleagues at Conservation Capital firmly believe that every one of us, be it a corporation or a person, bears a large responsibility towards our natural environment. Our drive, our collective vision is one of thriving landscape, safeguarding the natural capital which we rely on so heavily and pass it on to future generations. Recognizing nature as a valuable asset is at the heart of this vision and also forms the foundation of our NFA process. Thank you very much for your attention.
Well, I think we're going to end up with breaking the record for the fastest panel later. So can I bring on board Mr. Wei Zhang? Fantastic to have you here. Thanks, by the way, Alex. I should have said that. Mr. Zhang is the Deputy Director for the People's Bank of China, Yancheng branch. He is coming here representing the Yellow Sea Wetland Ecological Asset Operation Center. So it's a really innovative and very, very exciting initiative. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing more about it. Over to you, Mr. Zhang. Thank you.
好，感谢邓肯先生的介绍啊。大家下午好，我来自中国人民银行盐城市分行。那么今天呢，非常荣幸能参加这次专题研讨会。我报告的题目呢，就是构造黄海湿地生态资产运营中心，探索湿地保护融资的新模式。那么大家知道呢，盐城呢特点非常明显，就是说盐城的湿地资源非常丰富。那么拥有太平洋西海岸面积最大的这个淤泥质潮间带湿地，被誉为东方湿地之都。但是呢，随着经济社会快速发展呢，我们在湿地保护中，那么遇到了一些问题，就是湿地的面积呢，以及生物多样性下降这些问题呢都比较突出。因此呢，如何加强湿地的生态修复和保护，那么是摆在我们面前的一个重大的课题。那么近年来呢，中国人民银行盐城市分行深入贯彻习总书记的生态文明思想，聚焦双碳目标，紧扣低碳发展，借鉴国际国内经验，那么构建黄海湿地生态资产运营中心。其实一开始呢，我们是打造的是黄海湿地生态银行，但是呢，我们国内的同志都知道，现在银行呢这个词呢，在国家金融监管总局以及原来的银保监会是不允许随便用的，所以我们呢最终那么确定为呢是黄海湿地生态运营中心。那么今天呢，我报告呢分为3个部分。第一个部分呢是项目的背景。由于缺乏市场化的生态补偿与融资机制，那么湿地资源生态价值呢面临4难，也就是4个困难。第一个呢，缺乏资金投入，湿地生态修复与生物多样性难以为继。我们简单的做了一个统计，那么1980到2008年期间，盐城滨海湿地呢快速退化，渔业和农业大量挤占湿地。那么其中呢，减棚面积减少80%，芦苇面积减少30%。那在党的18大以来呢，国家高度重视我们整个的生态文明建设，盐城呢也逐步推行退渔还湿、退垦还湿。但是呢，湿地生态修复面临着巨大的资金缺口。我们测算呢，如果按照盐城市湿地保护总体规划，也就是19年到30年，那么11年到12年的一个时间序列的话，到2030年，湿地保护达到70%以上，自然湿地保护率达到82%以上。这样测算，那么需要投入资金达到1027.5亿元，其中中央省市财政可能拨款呢616.5亿元，其余的411亿元需要通过融资获得。那么刚才呢，我们也说到呢，就政府投入单纯的依靠财政和政府投入，可能资金是远远不够的，所以我们就有了这样一个构想啊。第二个方面呢，是缺乏市场化的生态补偿机制，湿地资源生态价值难以实现。那么盐城呢，湿地资源丰富，生物多样性价值丰厚，但是呢，由于生态资源呢分散碎片化，难以整合，所以呢，整个的价值呢难以实现。这是第二个方面。第3个方面呢，是缺乏市场化的交易平台，生态保护与经济发展那么难以获得平衡。如果了解盐城的同志应该知道呢，就是盐城市总体呢，它是属于淤长型的海岸，沿海的滩涂每年以2万到5万亩的速度向大海延伸。我们都说呢，盐城的东台、射阳都是世界上或者全国最年轻的土地嘛，它每年都在涨。那么由于缺乏落实湿地占卜平衡政策的细则与平台，那么有很多湿地虽然已经失去了自然属性，但是呢还是难以开发。这是第一个方面。第二个方面呢，就缺乏湿地碳汇交易市场。我们知道呢，湿地又称为地球之肾，那么它有很多的碳汇资源，但是呢，由于碳汇量无法准确的获取，同时呢又无法的进行准确的定价，它难以在市场进行交易。那么在这样情况下，那么湿地的价值难以获得充分的开发。第4个方面是缺乏湿地投融资合作平台，系统性的绿色融资模式难形成。那么一方面呢，财政资金投入相对不足，特别是在近年来，那么财政的支出的压力比较大，而且呢，它等于说入口来源少了，而出口就变得越来越多。在这种情况下，财政如果想用大量的资金来支持湿地保护，它是非常困难的。就是从政府端来说，那么大量的资金去支持湿地保护非常困难。那么另外一个方面呢，如果从湿地保护前期的资金投入来看，主要是银行系贷资金比较多，而其他的像债券、股权这种方式很少。所以在这样的一种背景下，我们就想呢，怎么来 把市场化的资金那么引入到湿地保护的这样一个大盘子里来。这是我汇报的第一个方面。第二个方面呢，是我们的探索与实践。那么坚持问题导向、政策导向、结果导向，推动黄海湿地生态资产运营中心的一个建设。其实大家呢肯定都知道，这个美国，那么它是有这个湿地银行的。其实它的那种模式呢，我们当时也想这个借鉴它的这种模式。那么整个的这个生态资产运营中心呢，其实说起来很简单，就是如果你保护了湿地、修复了湿地，那你可能就获得了类似于银行存款的一些权利。如果你破坏了湿地，那么这个时候呢，你就必须要拿出一部分资金啊，或者其他的方式啊来进行补偿，那就是贷款行为。其实类似于整个的就类似于一种银行的一种运转。那么同时呢，我们考虑到盐城较大的海洋碳汇发展潜力和现实基础，那么在主题架构上，我们还努力地拓展蓝碳金融产品和服务，将其发展成为具有综合这个服务功能的平台，为湿地可持续利用我们提供新的一个机遇。第一个方面呢，我们开展湿地保护投融资研究，提出黄海湿地生态资产运营中心的一个建设规划。前期呢，我们进行了大量的研究，那么在我们这个 PPT 上，在我们这个幻灯片上，那么已经展示了，向大家展示了。基本上这些呢，就后面的这些金融研究报告、金融研究专报，基本上都是我们人民银行，也就中央银行内部的刊物。而后期呢，我们跟这个黄海湿地研究院，那么一起形成了这个黄海湿地生态银行可行性和投融资模式的一个报告。那么这个报告呢，应该说做得比较详细。那么后面呢，我们前期推动了一些工作之后呢，我们第二步呢，就是密切和上级行和政府部门的沟通。那么大家知道呢，我们如果想推行一个新的创新产品，首先需要我们省防、总行一个支持，另外呢，也需要地方政府的一个支持。那么一方面呢，我们加强积极沟通，那么就可行性研究、立项、规划等等方面进行书面沟通。我们这个项目呢，被我们省分行，就原来是南京分行，现在是江苏省分行，列为重点工作项目，同时呢，也被盐城市政府列为重点工作项目。另一方面呢，我们组织座谈会、研讨会、上门走访，积极和自然资源规划局、湿地和世界资产这个保护中心、财政局等多个部门对接。我们也争取呢财政资金对我们这个项目进行了一定的支持。第三个方面，我们是引导湿地投融资产品创新，夯实组建黄海湿地生态资产运营中心的一个实践基础。第一个呢，是我们推动黄海湿地研究院加强呢碳汇核算研究。刚才我跟大家说，就整个的湿地它碳汇资源非常丰富，那么怎样把它核算出来，怎样把它在市场上进行交易，那么是一个非常关键的因素啊。这一点呢，也是黄海湿地研究院一直在推动的一个工作。第二个方面呢，我们指导金融机构创新湿地保护投融资产品。今年7月呢，我们盐城市金融学会呢颁布了盐城市湿地碳汇权益质押贷款的一个实施指南。那么目前呢，我们指导兴业银行发放了全省、江苏省首笔、全国第2笔碳汇贷1000万元。同时呢，我们引导金融机构主动对接湿地修复的融资需求。江苏银行、南京银行与中国银行以银团贷款形式呢，对东台整个授信14亿元。另外呢，中国银行向大纵湖湿地离我们这个地方不远，授信2.2亿元，环湖面积呢达到13.6平方公里。那么，《金融时报》《新华日报》等主流媒体对我们整个的产品创新呢进行了广泛的报道。我汇报到第三个方面，是我们取得的成效。首先，第一个，我们构建了制度框架，逐步形成了湿地信用抵销长效机制的一个设计经验。那么，我们设计了1114的一个运作模式，那么构建湿地资源的管控机制、运行保障机制以及交易机制。第二个方面呢，我们制定盐城湿地碳汇核算技术标准，开展湿地的生态项目价值核算。我们前期呢，已经对大丰的剑川养殖区、东台的川水湾地区、大丰的东沙紫菜养殖区、东沙岛，盐城人都知道呢，东沙岛是一个这个每天只会露出海面4个小时的一个岛，在这个地方，那么生产紫菜呢是非常好的一个环境。我们在这个地方呢，也开展了湿地的碳汇认证，为湿地碳汇交易、保护、开发以及融资提供了一个数据基础。第三个方面，我们设立了专项的绿色支行， 创新湿地碳汇融资产品。我们牵头出台了银行业绿色金融专营机构的自律规范，指导江苏银行设立了盐城市首家的绿色支行。另一方面呢，我们不断积累湿地碳汇融资产品创新经验。当前呢，已经有兴业银行、中国银行、南京银行和邮储银行等机构相继发放了以减碳量、远期收益权为质押的信贷产品。那么，为我们黄海湿地生态资产运营中心框架下，那么运作湿地碳汇交易和融资平台，积累了丰富的经验。应该说呢，我们中心的建设呢是一个系统的工程。下一步呢，我们市分行将以中心建设为载体，构建完善的湿地保护利用融资体系，实现生态产品价值的市场化、自然资源的资本化以及金融支持路径的绿色化，在实现中国乃至全球的双碳目标中展现金融担当。谢谢大家。
Right, we'll go to our panel discussion now. So Vinna, Director for Asia for BirdLife International, is going to come and take over from me to moderate this session. Over to you, Vinna.
Thanks a lot, Duncan. We initially had 2 questions for each sort of panelist, but I think we've reduced that to 1 in the interest of time. Let me start with a few introductions as they are getting the chairs ready. We have on our panel today Ms. Xu Meituan, Senior Economist, Director General, Department of International Green Finance and Cooperation, China Investment and Guarantee Corporation, ING. Ms. Tuan has over 20 years' experience in green finance and has been involved in the design and implementation of projects, including SMEs Finance Program funded by the Beijing Municipal Bureau of Finance, World Bank, Global GEF, China Energy Conservation Promotion Project Phase 2, Air Quality Improvement in Greater Beijing, Tianjin and Hebei region, ING's Green Financing Platform Phase 1, and the Air Quality Improvement in the Greater Beijing, Tianjin, Hebei region Green Financing Scale-Up Project Phase 2, financed by the Asian Development Bank. The implementation results of the above projects have received acclaim, and I think we're really, really delighted to have you with us today. Our second panelist, Terry Townsend, advisor to the Paulson Institute's Conservation Program. Terry is a Beijing-based biodiversity and climate change expert. He is currently an advisor to the Paulson Institute's Conservation Program. Formerly lead author and co-author of the annual climate legislation study in partnership with the London School of Economics. In 2019, he was invited by the Beijing municipal government to be a consultant on a project to protect and restore Beijing's biodiversity. In 2020, he was the co-author of a landmark study on how to finance biodiversity conservation, financing nature, closing the global financing gap, published to inform the UN Convention on Biological Diversity ahead of the Global Biodiversity Framework in Montreal in December 2022. In 2021, he was awarded a Gold Beijing Citizen Award by Beijing News for services to the environment, the first foreign recipient of that award. And finally, we have Mr. Hang Cheng, Director of the Management Office, Fujian Minjiang Estuary Wetland Nature Reserve. Mr. Cheng is the Director of the Fujian Minjiang River Estuary Wetland Nature Reserve Administrative Office and has been so since March 2017. Previously, he worked in several positions in Yancheng City, including the Director of Yancheng Municipal Party Committee Office, as Deputy Director, Yancheng Municipal Party Committee, and Secretary of the Party Working Committee of Jiangsu Street, Yancheng City, as Secretary of the Party Committee of Wailing Town, and as Deputy Director of Yancheng Economic and Trade Bureau and Manager of Textile Industry Corporation. And I'd also like to bring back Alex to the stage. If the 4 of you could come up, that would be lovely. Mr. Meidwan, if I can turn to you first. You have considerable experience. I don't think that's working.
Thank you.
If I can turn first to you, you have considerable experience in green finance, including in ADB projects. Can you tell us a little bit about ING's green financing mechanisms?
Thank you, Ina. I'm very honored to be here. Thanks, Alex and Dean Lee, and for your impressive presentation. I'm excited to say that you have already developed so many ambitious and creative ideas on the RFI. Speaking of our experience from ING, in this area of